morning. Welcome to Big Cube Sunday morning. It is a miraculous day here in the Northwest. Winter has officially abandoned us. I am getting ready to go plant peas. It's what you do when it's late January and up here. But more fun than that, I just like to make a couple of awareness. Karen, as you see her there, better known as KG, has been working with us at B Cubed in a collaborative and enjoyable work environment. As we, that was for you, Tom.
Yes.
As as we are putting together a 91,000 word or 90 something thousand word book. And we've got the title. Karen, would you like to say the title out loud?
At last discussion, the title was Our American Storm.
That is it. And so what we've got is a Jeff Sturgeon cover that is just beautiful. It is a storm clouds over America, which is kind of like where we are politically. You know, the tornado hasn't sucked our house up and dropped it in Oz yet. And, but we've got the title. We've got all the stories submitted, accepted. We have got Phyllis Irene Radford has been working tirelessly to get them formatted. And after that, she turns them over to Karen and I, and we do evil things to them. And we're going to have a book out here sometime. Oh, okay. And Andrew Lucas loves our title.
Well, that's one.
Karen, would you kindly tell him he can be replaced?
Not around here, he can't.
No, I know.
The
people
cats who are watching this, Tom and I are in the same house. So yes.
Hey, well, okay. Just as long as he's going to be that way, then I know how to get even. I'll put on the hat, and we can spend the day like this.
So
tell us about your guest, Tom.
All right. Our guest
and I'm
today
going to go away and let you guys talk in peace.
Yes.
Thanks, Bob.
You know, that thanks was a well-placed thanks.
Anyway, today we've got two people who are involved in helping build community. Pul Fischburg was one of the founders of Puget Ridge Cohousing, where I lived for 5 years back around the turn of this century. And Marnee Chua is involved in helping run Clarion West, but also in co-working facilities. And we're going to talk about the ways in which people make community, what we learn from being in community, and how we start using that in other places when we choose to leave. So I will allow each of them to say a little bit about the things they do. And you all know Karen. So
and people can enjoy watching my cat attempt to turn on the light in my closet.
Yes.
Oh, I see that. Now that you pointed out.
Yeah. Well, I'll be watching carefully
That's
now.
one of our cats.
I will. He's distracting.
So, Marnee, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Marnee Chua, and I do run Clarion West, but I also started Seattle's first cooperative co-working space, Works Progress. We started it in 2012, and it was definitely a product of trying to find community in Seattle as a fresh transplant and wanting to have a group of people that work together collaboratively.
And again, the name is Works Progress.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And Paul was, involved in the first new construction urban co-housing in North America, as I recall.
Yeah, I don't know whether to claim that title or not, but we back in 1981, I think, maybe 80 was our very first meeting, and we formed a group of people to talk about intentional community and cooperative housing. We decided to create an umbrella group for a little while, figuring that if we need 20, 30 families to start a co-housing community, we need maybe 20, 30, 100 to talk about it, to understand it, and to be ready to do that. A lot of people might be interested in cooperative housing, but you got to be in that part of your life. So it was about an 8-year journey to move in. I'm happy to talk about all that, but I lived in Puget Ridge Cohousing that we created after that 8-year process for 32 years. And my wife and I, both my parents lived and died there. We raised our daughter there. And of course, she's now 36 and on her own. And my wife and I just last Monday sent the official notice that we're selling our unit and moving out. And so there's a lot to unpack there in terms of living cooperatively for so long and then choosing to move on to something else. So I look forward to the conversation this morning.
So one of the things, I lived in Puget Ridge for 5 years with,
Right across the courtyard.
yep, right across the courtyard from Paul. And one of the things that I've noticed about my own life since is that there are a lot of things that I learned there about working with people that I really apply every day in this neighborhood where we don't have any sort of formal agreements or anything like that, but we know most of our neighbors and we connect with them. And how much does the experience of going through consensus decision making, going through all of the front loading of decisions so that everyone's on board, affect? Yeah, how much do you think it's going to affect your work, your living on the islands?
Oh, it's really enormous. I mean, I would say deep listening is the practice that you develop. One of the things that made consensus decision making both frustrating and incredible was the attempt to really hear everybody's concerns and not just go for 51%, but how can those concerns become the group's concerns, and how can we meet them with another iteration of whatever this idea is that we're trying to decide. So it can take a long time to make decisions. You don't have to go through consensus, but the learning, as you're saying, Tom, is really the deep listening that it takes to, I really understand your concern. And how that changes the decision is a different question in some ways, but that deep listening creates relationships that make the decision-making process easier, make the living together, working together process easier. I imagine, Marnee, that's been your experience too.
I would wholeheartedly agree. I often talk about I lived in the student co-housing in Oregon in the early '90s, and it was my first experience to um, consensus building and understanding like governance, community governance, and I think that it's informed a lot of my approach to everything after. Even just understanding, like even that piece of understanding why somebody is um, in disagreement with the group. You might have that one person that you take all of Sunday to convince that whatever it is, you need organic compost on the garden, or whatever the thing is, and we're not taught that as a society at any other time. You don't learn it in school. You don't learn it. I mean, we don't even hardly learn Robert's rules or anything else in school. And I think that just having that sense is very informative.
One of the meetings that we had about 2 years in, somebody commented, well, of course, they're part of the in group. And I was actually facilitating that meeting, as I recall. And I said, wait a minute, let's unpack this. Who is part of the in-group? Where is there an in-group? What is the in-group? Aren't we all the in-group? And I asked each person, are you part of the in-group or not? And nobody said they were. And nobody thinks they're part of the people who are actually making the decisions until you actually go through and point out that we all are.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that with the co-housing model as we developed it at Puget Ridge, it's a condominium. So there's a widely tread path of condominiums in our society. The difference in our condominium documents is that there's no elected board of directors. Everybody is a board member. Everybody's on the board. We have community meetings where every household is represented. Or if you can't make that meeting, you're choosing to trust the group that shows up. And there's obviously quorum. You can't just have 3 people show up and make a decision that's going to stick. But yeah, everybody's part of that decision-making process. But Tom, there is this, life that goes on right outside of that big circle meeting. And I think it is sort of human nature to feel like, oh, those guys there's something happening there and I'm not invited, or I don't feel invited, or, and so there is a kind of a constant, I don't know, personal assessment and discussion about how do I feel. And I think, again, it's another opportunity for people to talk and express how they're feeling about that stuff, and checking in with each other along the pathway and in the courtyard, and yeah, creating that sense of belonging, which I'll just drop, for me, feeling like I don't really understand this society and it doesn't understand me. And I'm Barbara and I are thinking, how are we going to have a family in a single family home in this neighborhood where people don't know each other? And creating co-housing was about creating that sense of belonging. And so it's ripe, because do I belong? Do I feel like I belong? And you can only assess that if you're in conversation and relationship with your neighbors.
I want to ask Marnee a little bit about technically how various ways co-working works. But before I do that, I want to jump in with something broader that applies actually to our political situation. I recently was with a group of people that I've known for 50 years, and we were having a discussion, and it reflected back on something that had happened to us 50 years before, in which we had let one person who was very loud dictate something the group was going to do. And 50 years later, this group of 70-year-olds was sitting there saying, let's not tell this aggressive person what we are sharing. Let's not do this, because they were so destructive. And yet at the time, 50 years ago, they let this person dictate everything the group did. And what this made me realize was the reason this had happened, something that none of us had wanted, was that we had not had any ground rules. And that when you go into a deliberate co-housing, co-working, collaborative environment, that there are ground rules that everyone knows coming in. And what had happened in our group was there had been no rules, and this strange amorphous stuff had gone on. So, Marnee, talk a little bit about what expectations people have or can have when they go into a co-working situation. I don't know what co-working would look like.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it actually dovetails. I had wanted to chime in as far as that community building piece and finding where you belong. It's something that has to be worked on all of the time. Like, you can start it, but you can't stop it and maintain the community. You have to constantly work on it and make sure people feel that they belong. With co-working, a lot of times that looks like creating a space that people want to be in. So again, that goes to that third space. it's not meant to be your home office. It's not meant to be the coffee shop. It's meant to be a place where you meet other people. You feel comfortable working alongside them, doing whatever projects or work that you intend to do, but also that you look over at lunchtime or whenever you're hungry and say, hey, it's time for coffee, or I need to go grab something to eat. Do you want to come with me? And continue that conversation. Or you feel comfortable talking about a problem that you're having or something that you're stuck in. And that could be personal, business, or otherwise, you know, something new. And creating that space does take, like you said, Karen, some ground rules. And one of the things that we do, because it's like for co-working, it's ongoing. People come for a month, they come for 5 months, they come for 10 years, right? We've had people that have been there almost since the very beginning and are still part of the active part of the membership. And so you have to continue that cycle. So as they come in on their very first tour, you talk to them about it. This is a place where you're invited to participate. This is a place where we eat together. Paul, that's like, I think, an essential piece of community, that you eat together. This is a place where everybody pitches in. Even if we have cleaning staff, everybody is expected to pitch in to some extent. This is a place where you're invited to make a recommendation. Do you want a book club? You are invited to get it started. And then when they do start formally, they have a community agreement. And ours is very simple because it is a co-working space. We don't want it to be too elaborate. So it comes down to just talk to each other, be open with each other. And, you know, there's our informal community agreement comes down to basically, don't be a jerk, you know, like if you clean up after yourself and talk to the other people. You're invited to talk to other people in the environment. But that continues, like in the workspace, we've found, and we were most active in doing it pre-COVID, that having leaders in the community that are there on a regular basis to regularly introduce and reintroduce other members is a vital part of the community.
So some people are just natural for living in collaborative situations. They just have the chops. But other people, through personality, background, experience, don't understand things like how much noise they're making or how they're spreading out all over the table and stuff like that. Is there hope for people? I have a reason for telling that. Is there hope for people who aren't naturally aligned to working communally? Can they learn?
Such a good question. Yes, people can learn, but you have to give them the space to do it. So some of that is being flexible in how it's done. Some of it is making sure that the community feels safe. So it goes down to those community agreements, but then also just walking around and making sure that people understand it's okay to, you know, go to that person and say, hey, you're too loud, you need to be in a phone booth, or you only need to be in, you're only paying for one table here, like, well, let's get together and sort this out. And that is the responsibility of community leadership, or community members that are active. But sometimes people take longer to kind of thrive in that environment. And I think a lot of that comes down to eating together, member lunch, time together, time spent together, opportunities to meet with each other, small group activities where people are invited in, everybody's invited in. In the early days, we played, it was ridiculous, but every Thursday we played at 10 a.m. This collaborative game on our phones. It's called Space Team. It's still active today. It Bluetooth, like functions through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and it involves a lot of shouting words out, stupid words, made up words, and trying to work together. We played it 15-30 minutes every Thursday, and we would walk through the space. Everybody's invited. Whoever was available would come in and just laugh together. And because everybody felt invited every week, you know, it was something that was easy to do and engage. And we've been post-COVID, it's been a little harder to re-engage, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit. But
Yeah.
it helped a lot to have something that you're just constantly inviting people into, and it does take that time. We had people that took years, but they felt comfortable to keep coming back for years.
You know, Marnie, this raises a concept for me in co-housing. You have your community space, then you have your semi-public space, then you have your semi-private space, and then you have your private space. And in some ways, if you're a private person, you get to be at home. And you know, there are some people's whose homes I've never been in, but there's plenty of opportunity for them to be in that. If I'm on my porch, my semi-private space, there's a much easier way to make a connection. And then if I step into that courtyard that we were talking about, Tom and I were talking about a little bit ago, where we lived together, I'm at that picnic table. That's an invitation to come. And I'm wondering with co-working, because as you were describing that scenario,
Yeah.
I didn't have a picture in my head of that. Is there private, semi-private, semi-public, public? Is there that kind of transitional space where you can go, hey, go into your private space, you're being too loud or you're being too messy, out of the communal space because of the
Yeah,
impact?
that's a great comparison and a good question. And it'll depend on the space, different spaces. When we first got to Seattle, Seattle's first co-working space was Office Nomads, and they were very much off of the co-working as a movement has shared, like as internationally has shared vision for collaboration, welcoming, and inclusive community. And Office Nomads really they fought hard and long to develop that right from the get-go, and they had phone booths, so private phone booths to put people into, a few, and I think initially one off, like meeting space, one private meeting space, but otherwise they would not put in private offices, and the reason is they wanted a third space for people to engage. And it worked very, very well. And when we initially started, we modeled after them. Since even before COVID, we had started adding the private offices because we saw that small teams, especially very small businesses that were adding their first employees, they needed that private space more, and they weren't finding it affordably out in the world. You know, a lease is 1 or 5 years and it can be quite expensive, and we wanted to meet that need, so we started adding private offices. And now post COVID, it's the most popular kind of
Mm.
form of space where people feel most comfortable by themselves in an enclosed private space, but they like to know that they can go outside or open their office door and have some engagement with other people.
Yeah,
And then that
this
changes over time.
this kind of gets to Karen's point of people who are more, Karen, you were talking about people who are natural at it, but I
Mhm.
think there's also a spectrum, not natural, good at it and not good at it, but people who are really thriving in that communal, we're all doing this together next to
Yes.
each other. And yeah, I love being part of this communal office space, but most of my time I feel more comfortable or whatever in that private space. So it sounds like you can accommodate people who have different propensity for that level of communal engagement or you know, solo practitioner.
Yeah.
I, I certainly noticed at Puget Ridge that there were some people who were, as you were saying, who are significantly more wanting to stay in their private space.
Mm.
And there were different styles, which occasionally led to some conflict. And the question of how do we work with getting people to respect styles that are not our own?
Mhm.
Is very difficult. You know, it's even difficult to get people to admit that that's what's going on.
Mhm.
Are there ever, I'm going to ask you both, times when the group realizes that someone in the group who is a good member needs the space to be modified? They need more soundproofing. They need the parking. They need more parking spaces. They need what? And how does that process work?
Yeah, I guess what comes up for me are the communal projects, not so much one person saying, I need something that's going to benefit or make it easier or better for me. But there were certainly ample opportunities for people to say, I've got an idea for a modification here. Anybody interested in this? I think about some of the conflicts. The first TV in the common house was intense because
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, I
yeah.
mean, you're laughing. It's funny in a way, and of course, this is a throwback to the early 90s. We eventually got a projector, and then with a screen you pull down, and then we had now we have the big screen TV, right, with whatever Netflix and internet capacity. But back in the beginning, that first TV was in a little cabinet. It was about this big, the TV. But kids could come in and watch TV, and some of the parents were like, no control over that. That's a problem. Like, I don't want my children consuming, the stuff that's on TV without any guidance. And so that was an example of a modification, I think, that you're maybe contemplating. That was really challenging. And, I mean, eventually the TV went in, and eventually whatever rules we created fell away. Because sometimes you need the rules to feel safe in saying, okay, I can do this if there's some guardrails. And then after a while of developing the use patterns and seeing what happens there, I want, once there's a big screen, now I want if you're going to watch something in the common house, you've got to close the curtains, because I don't want to walk by and see this, representation of American culture beaming into my, I don't know. Some people felt that way. So you develop the patterns of figuring out the how to use this thing together as a community of individuals.
I would say that was very similar to the progress of Works Progress. Like right from the very beginning, we did a lot of that concept of space flow, especially early on when we had a larger space. But even until now, we would test new things. Somebody would recommend something, want to try something, and we would just test it and see how it was used, because that's a big piece, is as you bring the community in, how are they going to use it? And sometimes it surprises you. Sometimes it's used as intended. We had one large space with all of the dedicated desks in the past that people would walk in and their initial thought was, oh, this is not good. This is like a bullpen. This is, everybody is talking at once. It's so loud. And some people thrived in it because there was noise in the background that they didn't have to listen to. It was unrelated to them. It wasn't other people's projects that they had to deal with. And so they could let that noise go and be white noise in the background. And it made them feel comfortable. And other people needed to be in the other room that had been intended for the loud space, but turned into the quiet space. And just, they would just let the flow of it help decide how we would continue to use it, what got solidified over time. And as people said, I need more of this or more of that, we would test it in different scenarios, sometimes in a small corner office. Does this work? And see how it flowed. So a lot of times with community, it's trial and error.
Marnee, we have someone asking, what kind of work, what variety of work goes on in a co-working situation?
So our our space, and I think a lot of the original intent with co-working was always more focused on what is the kind of the small business, the freelancer, or the remote worker going to need in a third space. Shockingly, I think to a lot of people, co-working does better in down times than it does in uptime, because in good economy, most people are working 9 to 5 jobs with a business, and maybe they're well, now more often they are remote workers, but in the past it was maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but they had very strict definitions with their jobs. But in a down economy, people are tending to freelance or start up their own thing, and that looked like we have had one of my favorite examples. We had a woman that made recycled wire jewelry at her desk in the co-working space, and next to her there was a person that was doing sleep coaching, and next to them there was a gentleman that was developing um, the databases for companies, so computer programming of that kind of high skill level and focus, and we had so a lot of very, very different types of work is what tends to make a really thriving co-working space do well. Ours has always been, we kind of gently referred it to as mid-career professionals. So slightly older, not necessarily fresh start out of college, slightly older, know what they're doing and trying to do, and have a lot of them have families and are just trying to have a flexible space, meet other adults outside of the home or the school environment, and have community.
Puget Ridge was a fairly broad range of ages starting out. I commented that in the first 5 years we had 2 people born there and 2 people die, which was actually interesting. How does co-working space handle people leaving and new people coming in? Because the transitions are one of the most fraught parts of any sort of community building.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, Paul, if this is true with co-housing, but after a certain amount of time, my feeling is nobody ever really leaves. Like they're always part of the community, no matter where they go in the world. But a lot depends for us on the amount of time that the person spent in it. And part of that is because they have either developed relationships or not. If they've been there a month or two, most of the time they haven't developed any strong relationships. Sometimes a few, but most of the time not that strong. If they've been there a year or 2 or 3, that's a lot of times when there might be an extra lunch or an extra dinner happy hour that to go with them leaving, or just more people saying goodbye in different ways. But there's not been a formal transition in and out. As far as that piece goes, I think a lot just depends on how well the relationship has developed over time. And we have had people come back. They moved away and came back, and then they came back to the co-working space. They got a different job and had to leave, and then came back after that job changed. So, and we have people that come to the happy hours, and now are member owners. Even still, they're not giving up their ownership just because they've moved on. We have retired folks that they come for the happy hours and the reunions and the holiday specials.
What is a member ownership? Are there different levels of ownership?
There's one level of ownership, but we have active owners and not and inactive owners. So an active owner is somebody that is actively paying for use of the space.
Yeah, and there's certainly with co-housing, you have your own space that you own, that you live in, and people who are there. I don't know, Paul. I know there was some renting out of space. for a while, but I don't know how common that was and how much people, how that affected the interactions. Because I
Yeah.
wasn't there for that.
You know, technically, I talked about the condominium documents and saying that everybody is a board member. We also distinguish between residents and owners. So there have almost always been a few examples of people who moved but maintained ownership and rented out their unit. And so we contemplated that, and the concept is the people who are engaged in making decisions are the people who live there.
Yep.
If you leave and you know, annually we pass a budget, you get to voice your opinion on the budget. But if we're talking about, you know, should we have a TV in the common house, or what's our plan for landscaping in this area, or, you know, running the community garden, the offsite owners are not involved in that discussion. So there've always been renters. And that is a great thing. And I can't speak to the feeling of being a renter in this community where you're, you know, sending down really deep roots. You know, from my perspective, I don't see, oh, they're a renter, you know, they're lower down in the hierarchy or something. But I don't actually know what it feels like to be a renter. There are renters, as I just observe, who are deeply engaged in the process of community building and in the work of the community and in the social life of the community, more so than particular owners. So there really is, you know, a spectrum there. You know, the other thing I was thinking about is a key component of that depth of community is the length of time. You know, I mentioned at the very beginning, this is 32 years that I've been there, not to mention the years planning and creating it. There are still 4 out of 23 households after Barbara and I leave that are originals, that they've been there for the 32 years. So that's a pretty remarkable group. And there are a number of originals who are no longer there because they died in the community. So the level of tenure, the depth of relationships, and you know, this I wanted to mention, this is kind of going along with this question of people who are naturals, or you know, charismatic in a positive sense versus people who are more troublesome or have difficulty. When you're in there, you know, if this is a person in your field of, you know, your life, you may not engage. They're a difficult person. I'm gonna avoid them. But when you're in community and you're sharing meals and you're making decisions together, and it's over a long period of time, you really come to love those people. And there is a depth that happens for, you know, from that, the very, you know, fabric of what we're trying to create, that that really transcends those kind of likes and dislikes, which is really an amazing thing. And back to the question that Tom posed at the very beginning, that is something I've taken with me. You know, this person who I'm meeting, not in co-housing, just out in the world, troublesome person. Oh, I know deeply that if I continue to engage with that person long enough, I will come to love them. Um, I mean, maybe that's an overstatement. There've got to be people who I won't get there with, but it really is. It's an openness to that idea.
I just want to endorse that so much. We have definitely seen that as well. And I wanted to just very quickly touch on for our space when we turned it into a real cooperative. We made it a consumer cooperative that it is not a requirement that you're an owner to use the space. And the reason that we did that was because it doesn't that type of ownership and community membership truly doesn't come naturally to, I would say, most people in the country. Like the majority of people have not experienced, have not seen it, are completely unfamiliar with it, but they hear something like co-working. It got real popular at some point. oh, it's good for your business or some other thing. And so they might try, or for us, the most common is they just have to get out of their house for whatever reason. Their kids, their spouse, the dog is driving them crazy and they have to get into another space. And so one of the things that we really tried to design it was to open it up to as many people as possible and give them a chance to experience it. And then hopefully we bring them into becoming owners, and engage with them over time. And many of those people, to Paul's point, can be troublesome, and some of it is just they're not experienced with it, or they're not good communicators.
Mhm.
But over time they deeply love the space as well, and they can become some of the best advocates.
Marnee, I think that our audience probably has a grip on co-housing in the sense that they're familiar with homeowners associations and condo
Yeah.
associations. But for co-working, I don't think most of us are aware of places where we can go in and you pay for a month to get a desk. But do you guys rent a building? Do you own a building? What is the financial underpinning of the co-working?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of the spaces are acts of love, especially the ones that are focused on community, the independently owned spaces or operated spaces. And those are the ones that you will find are advocates and coherence to the original co-housing movement. So I specify that because everyone has heard of WeWork, and that is not co-working. It never was. It was never modeled financially responsibly, and it was never community based in a community.
WeWork is this big thing where a company takes a big space, somebody sits at a front desk, and people come in and they buy space by the hour or by the day or whatever. We have one
Yeah,
of those
yeah,
in my neighborhood.
yeah. And I mean that what you're describing is the basic model, but beyond that is a third space in people's community that invites people together. And so because it has been primarily an act of love, it is typically one or two people that put up the money to rent a space in a building. Sometimes a city will step in and rent that space and try to work it out, and that's wonderful. Libraries now are trying to dedicate some spaces, and
Mm.
I'm a big advocate for that as well. Um, but it has typically been a group of people or one person that will rent the space and take all of the responsibility of the lease and the expenses and the insurance on themselves and invite others in to use the space. Many will try and make it, they will call it very loosely a cooperative. But ours is, there are fewer that are like actually functionally structured as cooperatively owned. And it makes so much more sense though, as far as operation and liability and all these pieces where everybody's coming together. There are some that own their buildings, but it's fewer because most of the independently owned spaces are small. I would say financially less able to buy a commercial building and manage it. Um, we have over the years a couple of times attempted to buy. I think owning would be one of the most ideal situations for the co-op, and we've discussed it. Here comes my cat. We've discussed it quite a bit over the years, but there's a big leap from renting a desk monthly and owning a business to being responsible for a large building. Um, and we have right now we have our best landlord ever, and who owns one building and cares about us deeply, and it's been the best relationship we could develop. But most of the time it is, yeah, a lease takes somebody, a commercial lease, especially in a large city, it takes somebody to take all of the responsibility and the ownership. And it's a big leap. And a lot of times folks will let, like, the most ambitious person gets to do that, and everybody else will just try to join and help them out.
Marnee, question, how large is this? Is this a growing movement? Are you part of an organization around? How likely is it that one of our listeners on this podcast would be able to find one of these in their city?
Oh, so likely. Yeah, so it has been a growing movement since 2005. The first official co-working space in the United States was 2005 in San Francisco. Brad Newenberg actually kind of started it out of a feminist collective in San Francisco. And what's fun is one of our members was not in that one, but in kind of basically the city's second or third space, and started his own business there, and came and is one of our co-working owners in Seattle. And so, but it is an international business or international movement. There are national, international agreements. They call them co-working unconferences that folks can go to. So it's growing. But what I always tell people, what we used to do, we used to have a Seattle Collaborative Space Alliance with all of the independent owners very actively engaged. And we used to do this where we would encourage people to tour at least 5 different spaces to find the one that they loved and the one that they fit in. And people would always be so confused. You're pushing me out to the competition. We're like, no, go find the one that you love, and then you will love co-working, and that's what is important. And so if they went to 5 places, they would get a mug, a co-working space traveler mug, just to see the. And we've lost that since COVID. It was a huge loss, really, for the community, and we've lost a number of the independently owned spaces, but they are starting to pop back up. And so what I tell people is, if you're looking for co-working, especially because you're looking for community, find the independently owned co-working spaces near you. The ones that are in your neighborhood are the ones that have been developed for community, and the ones that are going to be focused on and care about your community. They're going to do a community engagement, both in the space and in the neighborhood. And they're going to kind of give you that third space engagement that you want. You know, if you have to drive somewhere to it, and it's owned by some big company outside of town, they're not going to care about you or the community, and they're not going to be trying to do that engagement piece so much.
Okay. A quick one before I move over and ask similar questions to Paul. How large is this nationally? About do you have any sense of how many co-working spaces there are in the country?
I think none of us really know post-COVID, but by 2019, I can't give you real numbers off the top of my head, but Seattle had something like 30 spaces just in the city. And the whole greater Seattle area had, I don't know, it was like 45. And that was just this city. And if you went to any city across the country, across the world, you would find similar numbers.
Wow, I'm impressed.
At the height of that, one thing that we used to say was like, we were never competing with each other as a movement. The only thing we ever competed with was people's home offices, their basements that they converted into home offices, or their tendency to be isolated, because 1/3 of the country before COVID was already working remotely or trying to start their own business from home. And we did, at that height, we didn't have enough seats to accommodate all of those people. And since then, I would say it's even greater need, and fewer spaces to accommodate it. So if you love it, go talk to your library. You can start small in a library, in a church. It's not getting used as much. You can start small in just about anywhere. And in fact, I was going to point out one thing we did do when we initially started. We were opening. The plan was to open a co-working with childcare on site.
I remember that.
We were not officially able to get that started right from the get-go, and so Works Progress became an adult but family-friendly space. Within a few years, we got enough people together that we were able to open out of a church a co-working with on-site childcare. And by the time that closed with COVID, it had been serving about 100 families a year in the on-site childcare. And the same kind of focus is bringing people together that are otherwise isolated, raising their children, especially the very small children, to get to work collaboratively, to do the things that will help them launch after their kids go back to school, um, and it was almost just natural.
Okay, this helps. Paul, tell us a little bit about the co-housing movement in the United States. And I know that Tom was involved in some of the beginning of that. Has it grown? What factors have affected it?
Yeah, well, when we started, there was an architect couple who were doing graduate work in Denmark, and they were traveling around doing, in architecture graduate school, and they saw all these communities in Denmark where the people became their own developers to build these communities, and there were about 100 of them in Denmark. They came back to the United States, couldn't find any literature on it, so they went back to Denmark and documented this and wrote a book. And then came to the United States, published the book, started doing slideshows, and that's when we found out about it. And so they did a workshop in Seattle, I'm going to say 1990, early 90s. And we had like 100 people showed up to the library to see this slideshow just from posters around. And they did a workshop because there were so many people at the slideshow. They said, if we did a workshop this weekend, how many people would come? There were over 20 people that came to the workshop. And Winslow Co-housing and our group and maybe one other core group formed out of that to start working on creating co-housing in the Seattle area. There are now, I think, probably 15 in the Puget Sound area, co-housing communities. Across the United States, there's easily 100. There are national organizations and architects and developers who specialize in co-housing. I would say, the biggest impediment to the growth of the movement is the cost of housing, the availability of land. One of the early conversations we had was, are you talking about urban? Are you talking about suburban? Are you talking about rural? And you need to sort yourselves out pretty quickly on lines like that, because we realized in our group we're all urbanites. We love the city. We want to be in the city. We ended up in West Seattle. It's a 15-minute bus ride from downtown.
And it's right on the bus line.
And it's right. Yeah, it's pretty close to the bus line. So anyway, that's a little bit of it. It's a growing movement. I think there's an attempt to use existing buildings. There's an attempt to buy houses in an area and maybe take down some fences and grow it over time. Yeah, and then there's the traditional co-housing model of trying to buy a chunk of land and designing it right from the start.
Paul, have you seen in the last 10 years a little kind of a resurgence of interest?
There's never not been a surgence, a surge. I do have to say that I'm not like in the movement. I worked pretty hard with a group of volunteers to create Puget Ridge Cohousing, and then I lived there. I don't go to conferences. I'm not really following the movement, so I can't speak so much to it. Although I just know it's popping up everywhere. You read stories, you hear stuff on NPR, you hear from friends and neighbors. It's definitely a movement. I won't say it's the answer to our housing challenges. But it's growing.
One of
I
the
have to
things
ask,
that I've noticed about the stories on NPR and things like that is that they are almost exactly the same as they were back when I was involved in around the turn of the century, where I was actively involved with helping run conferences and also with helping the national cohousing.org organization, being on the board. But as far as the mainstream community world is concerned, it hasn't changed significantly. As far
I
as
noticed a question in the chat about the difference between co-housing and condominiums. And I would say that, as I mentioned, our community is a condominium, but condominium, it really has a pretty broad definition. The difference, when we were looking at creating the community, we felt more aligned with the concept of cooperative. But to get a mortgage to buy a cooperative unit back 25 years ago, it was much more difficult. You probably
Mhm.
had to be a seller finance if you wanted to move and sell your unit. And so we gathered a group of experts together, finance folks, and we said, what should we do? Co-op, zero lot line, co-op, a condominium, and we settled on condominium. So the big difference is that we make decisions by consensus and everyone's on the board. That's, fundamentally, however, uh, in a condo, I can sell my unit to whoever. Before you buy a unit in co-housing, you have to tour the community. You have to meet with a new member orientation group, and you need to understand what the expectations are. You need to be on a committee. You need to do 6 chore teams or 6 work parties a year, 5, 6 work parties a year. So this is what it is. The meals program is voluntary, but it's a central focus of the community.
Mhm.
So you got to learn all of this stuff, and then you're like, okay, is this for me or is it not for me? We don't say you're in or you're out. We don't set up a gate. If after hearing all of that, this is what you want, then come on in. And that has worked. Very, very rarely, I guess, a one person who bought in the early days, moved out, said, this is not for me. And it didn't stick after a year and a half. But
Mhm.
everybody else, by the time you get in, you see it, you know what it is, you've heard it, you feel the expectations, and you feel that sense of community, and you decide if this is for you or not.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah. Yeah. The no gatekeepers other than does this work for you? Also people have to attend a community meeting,
Yeah.
at least one, the general consensus building meetings, which is, I think, that drove away a fair number of people. They discovered that it was not what they wanted. Isn't that it drove them away? It's that they said, this isn't what I thought it would be.
But Bob had asked how this relates back to earlier, the communal stuff of the 1960s and 70s. And I
And the
don't think
30s and 40s and even earlier.
I don't think there's a direct line, but I'm willing to bet that some people with experience in that background later emerge in co-housing and co-working.
In fact, there are some groups that call themselves co-housing that started out as communes. And I think Sangaya dates back before the co-housing movement, for
Bob,
example.
I would say I think there's
Sangaya
more of a
does, yeah.
connection between cooperatives like
Yeah.
Yeah.
than communes, because many communes weren't cooperative at all. They had some incredibly charismatic dictator running them. But
Like the
cooperatives,
farm.
I was deeply involved in a number of food cooperatives that
Mhm.
attempted to bring together various economic aspects of the community into one buying group, which were really interesting.
Yeah, Karen, I think you can go back and find that at the core of every group of people gathering is somebody with enough charisma to be the magnet that draws them in. And in some cases, that's more focused around the sense of community that you get when you get these people together, and then it either grows or shrinks. I mean, the real question would be, can it function without this individual magnet?
Yeah.
Uh, and because if the person who was originally that has a true vision of community, then he will help or she will help build something that will survive their absence.
Mhm.
And so it's I mean, almost all of the communes from it was very popular in the 1830s. You
Mhm.
know, space
Yeah.
was massively available. But anyway, we could go on forever on that. And I just wanted to say, guys, this is a fascinating discussion. And on the communal work areas, I think you have to give corporate executives credit for creating much of it. They built themselves wonderful private offices that were interconnected by private hallways. And then they took all of the drones and they shoved us all over into cubicles. And the cubicles evolved in cubicle land. I can see much of what you are talking about actually happened. How do you keep Joe from spreading out too much? How do you tell him his to turn down his radio? How do you tell him to not use
Mhm.
a speakerphone? All of these things are part of having a healthy communal work environment. We've all seen it, or those of us who've worked in uh, the office environment have seen it, and it is amazing. The things that I've heard, uh, oh my God, Marnee talking about. Anybody who ever thinks that a huge engineering design project just shows up because of two engineers working in an office by themselves, no. They literally thrive and build these things in communal work environments. And it is amazing to hear what you're saying and have lived through that and realize that all of these tools are readily available in the American work environment. We just are horribly bad at recognizing them and applying them. And you guys have made some really solid arguments for how successful they can be, and I'm
Well, and
appreciating that.
I will say that when it's many different individuals working together, um, but working independently, but in the shared space, it can be much easier to collaborate and be friendly and to develop that community than it can be in a place where you're working together for somebody else. I see like Cube Farm came up in the conversation, and that can be miserable depending on the culture of the work environment, and that you're working for someone else, and this opportunity to work at the very least just choose where and how and when you work helps change that regardless of the shape of the space. But especially when you're in a like worker owned union environment where you have a lot more say in what's going on, it changes drastically regardless of the kind of space. Yeah, the call center, people would a call center that's everybody together working for somebody else and working like and you're listening in, they've got a similar job to yours, or you're in direct competition with each other. That is miserable, and that is not the co-working environment
That's
that is.
sales.
Yeah.
Uh, I worked for years at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation.
Mhm.
Now, that was government contractors working for the Department of Energy, but we had a shared vision and a shared mission, and that
Mhm.
was to do whatever it took to make this nuclear waste dump safe for our children and our grandchildren. And
Yeah.
that was a shared goal that when everything else boiled down to safety for the future, really kicked in. And so um, I enjoyed it. But
Yeah.
we're running at the end of the time, and I just wanted to say you're part of uh, we're B Cube Press, and you're part of the um, um, writer Clarion.
Clarion
Um,
West.
Clarion
Clarion
West.
Clarion West.
such I owe you the debt of gratitude for 20 years of I ran a writers group, and we stole your rules, your guidelines, and it made us far more successful as teaching us how to work together and respect each other's time and space and positions and attitudes. Uh, and so to you and the people behind you, ahead of you, above you, below you, around you, that set up such a good system.
That's
And
an incredible system. And more people should, yeah. I'd love to see more people doing workshops. We
Yeah.
all need these stories. I see Andrew in the comments. Yay for yay
well,
for
Yeah.
3 books for
you can't get Andrew to shut up.
So I
love
would
to
like to give each of Marnee and Paul a chance to say a final word or two before we take off and let people go have their day. So, Marnee, you want to go first? Then we'll have Paul.
Oh, sure. Thank you for the time. It's been wonderful. And Paul, I could talk. I love co-housing. For folks interested in cooperative development in general, there's a thriving co-op Discord and regular meetups in the city of Seattle. So if you're in the greater Seattle area and otherwise a larger community, I think for me, what I've seen is a resurgence, I think, of interest in co-ops, especially as we're just trying to get out of what is going on with the tech industry and investment funding today. So I just encourage people, get involved in a co-op because they are wonderful community builders, whether it's co-op housing or co-working or whatever, what have you. They're wonderful community builders, and I think waiting for more people to start them up and to join them.
Yeah, and I'll just back up one step and say, talk to your neighbors and listen to each other, because these are the principles of community. Whether we have the time or the interest or the need to start a cooperative or move into cooperative living, we can sure use more deep listening to each other and talking to our neighbors.
That is a brilliant notion. The talking to your neighbors. I literally, for the first time, moved into a town inside city limits, and I made a commitment to myself to talk to my neighbors, uh, and I have never been sorry. Um,
Great.
I get a
And
phone call if my dog gets out. Um, it's just wonderful stuff. So, I mean, these are principles that you can live by as
Wherever you are.
people, not just individuals.
Yeah.
So, Tom, anything else before I say something brilliant about BQ Press?
I think that we're at a point where you get to turn this into the ad that it's supposed to be.
I want to do a lead into B Cubed Press. B Cubed Press has recently put out a book that is very focused on community and what happens to a community when the government abandons it and the people within the community have to decide what they're going to do to preserve their community. And that's Scott's Planet. And Bob will probably talk more about that. So I'll turn it over to Bob.
Well, actually, that is a good point because Scott's Planet is a time when we start off with the principle that the government has discovered that, or corporations have discovered that they can literally build spaceships for virtually little or nothing because they've got um, faster than light allows them to get in and out of the solar system without light lag, and they just build and build and build and throw people on these ships and send them out into the world or into the galaxy to settle planets. And then all of a sudden, one day, some bookkeeper says, we're sending a lot more out than we're ever getting back. I mean, the promised returns on investment just don't seem to be there. And they said, well, just tell us which colonies are giving us the good return on investment. And then he did, and they said, okay, everybody else, we've been so glad to be part of your world, but excuse me,
You.
but you're but now we're going to let you be on your own. We're going to give you liberty and freedom for you to be your own people. And they abandoned them. And so you start off with a group of people who were somewhat had a sense of community to all get on the same ship. And then they're just being told, now you're on your own. Now we'll take any of you back now, one time offer, but the rest of you, you're stuck out there. But they didn't use that word. And it was a great fun to write. The stories that came in were wonderful. And as Karen says, it is a story about how you build a sense of community, how it gets back into how people find, are they in the right place? How do they share? How do they cooperate? What's there? So that's called Scott's Planet. Now, I'll say this also. I screwed up. Somewhere along the line, my list of people that I sent their authors copies to, I seem to have mucked it up. And so I saw a couple of posts that tells me that people who participated in this great community, because BQ Press is a great community, didn't get their authors copies. So anybody out there, tell me, and I'll make sure you get one. Okay. And because that's just part of your deal. Because there's one thing you can both, I think both of our guests can agree to. Keeping commitments is part of the bedrock of a communal relationship, a communal system. And so for BQ Press, where I'm very proud of it being a communal system, we want to keep those commitments. And so I apologize, and I will make it right. Tom, you got anything else to add?
I think that we've had a really good discussion here today, and I want to thank both of our guests. You done me good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for connecting, Tom. And Marnee, nice to meet you. Karen, Bob, thank you.
Yes,
You guys
Thank
be
you.
well. And so I'm going to end the stream.